Okay, so far we've gone through kind of some of the basic aspects of public choice and the political process. We've talked about the differences between government and markets. We've talked about the different groups in politics, right? We've got voters, politicians, and bureaucrats. We've talked about voting and how if government programs are structured in such a way such they're, of the type of type 1 or type 3, then government tends to be efficient. That is, voters tend to select government programs that are efficient, and they reject programs that are not efficient, right? But other types of programs, like type 2 and type 4, generally are not efficient, right? And so, just like in chapter 5, we talked about instances where markets have problems, right? We're now going to spend some time talking about those instances when government has problems. And these are things that, we see, and some of these topics that we'll touch on will be things that you're aware of, right? And so it'll be things that you kind of already know go on in government, and it's probably something you don't like, right? And so that's what we're focusing on here and in these next few videos, is really those instances when political process has problems, right? Now, the first one is what we call the special interest effect, or this is essentially the impact of special interest groups, okay? So, what is an interest group? Well, it's pretty broad, but usually it's a company or a group that has a very specific interest, okay? And they generally will influence government in favor of their position or interest, right? So, and again, I said these interest groups can be broad. These interest groups can be on, say, moral issues, right? There's interest groups when it comes to different aspects of ownership of guns, right? There's interest groups that when it comes to different aspects of abortion, right? So there's a lot of interest groups that are kind of lobbying government on moral issues. But that's not what we're really kind of getting at here, because those interest groups aren't lobbying for like a government program or something like that, right? They're advocating for legal changes, right? So what we're getting at here specifically are interest groups that lobby or influence the government in favor of, say, a company or an industry, company or industry. And probably the best example here would be lobbyists who represent farm groups, right? Corporations, right? Some of the large corporate farms, right? So the corn farmers hire lobbyists that represent them, right? And this is how kind of the corn subsidies are maintained. Same thing with soybeans. The sugar industry in the United States hires lots of lobbyists to maintain the protections that they have, right? Basically, we can't grow cane sugar here in the United States. That's grown in kind of South and Central America. But it turns out cane sugar is way cheaper to grow, right? Sugar grown here in the United States is primarily from sugar beets and is much more expensive. But the sugar industry, through lobbyists, maintains protections to keep out cane sugar. And so that's why our soft drinks have, things like sweeteners like corn syrup or other types of sweeteners that are derived from other things like sugar beets, corn, stuff like that, right? So these interest groups basically are lobbying to gain an advantage, and it's usually for a company or an industry, okay? Clearly they are self-interested, like by definition they're self-interested, and there's a lot of them, right? So if you know anything about politics in D.C., you know they are all located on K Street. Next time you're in D.C., go over, find K Street, and you'll just see all these buildings, and they're occupied by lobbyists. They all dress the same. They look the same. They're all wearing the same suit. And there's a ton of lobbyists up there, okay? Okay. Now, these lobbyists are generally lobbying for some particular issue, okay? And this gets to the heart of the matter, right? A special interest issue is one that generates a sizable benefit for a small group of people, but imposes the cost on the rest of the citizenry, right? And again, this is why agricultural programs are a good example of this, right? So let's think about corn subsidies. Okay. So this is a sizable benefit for a small group, right? Corn subsidies only go to corn farmers, right? If I grow corn in my backyard, I don't get corn subsidies, right? This is for these large farmers that are primarily in the Midwest, and now actually a lot are out in California as well. So it's a specific small group of people. And these subsidies are sizable, like tens of thousands of dollars. Some large farms get over $100,000 for these subsidies. I mean, it's a lot of money, right? And the costs are spread out on the taxpayers, right? So for a lot of these programs, my taxes are maybe $10 to $15 higher per year, okay? And so this is an example of one of those programs that is type 2. That tends to be pretty inefficient, right? And it leads to what we call concentrated benefits and dispersed costs, right? That is, farmers get lots of money, right? And the cost is borne, we'll say, the cost is paid by the taxpayer. Okay, so some of you might be thinking, okay, well, look, if this small group of farmers gets all this money and we have to pay the bill, why don't we just go talk to our representatives? Why don't we just go get this changed so we don't have to deal with this anymore? Well, it's not that simple, because we as the voters have what's called a collective action problem, okay? That is, what is a collective action problem? Well, you and I, we're all different, unique people, right? There's probably some issues we're passionate about and some issues we're less passionate about, okay? So how likely is it that if you and I get together and we say, you know, this is just egregious, we are tired of this, we're going to try to get rid of these corn subsidies, right? And we try to get other people involved and we try to hire a lobbyist, right? How many people are going to get all worked up and go hire a lobbyist where they're going to have to spend tens of thousands of dollars on this lobbyist so that we can all have like $10 off our tax bill, right? So it's not worth the effort. Yeah, it's kind of a pain in the butt that I paid $10 more in my taxes, but I'm not going to go hire a lobbyist and try to organize hundreds of thousands of people. And again, these are hundreds of thousands of people who probably have totally different interests, right? How are you going to get us all united on this one topic of reversing corn subsidies, right? Whereas the farmers are a very organized group, right? It's a small group. They get together, they hire lobbyists, and the lobbyists have one goal, is to maintain these corn subsidies, right? So they're a very small group, a concentrated group, a well-organized group, and there's a lot of money at stake, right? They stand to lose tens of thousands of dollars, even hundreds of thousands of dollars, if these corn subsidies go away, right? You and I stand to benefit $10, right? So there's just a difference in incentive and motivation, right? And so because of this, we the voters have what's called a collective action problem, right? We're not terribly motivated to reverse some of these programs.